If you've ever stepped into the ring or to the octagon, fighting like your life was literally on the line, then you know that to perform and even survive, it requires a unique blend of presence, groundedness, focus, and an unwavering conviction, belief, and confidence. It's not a stretch to suggest you still need all of those intangibles and traits to help you perform your best on the golf course and in any aspect of your life. Today, I'm grateful to introduce you to Mr. Patrick Sebastien. Yes, he's a performance coach. Yes, he's a mindset coach for golfers, athletes, and entrepreneurs alike. Yet he also brings over 20 years of experience training, competing, and teaching in both Muay Thai and MMA. And his unique perspective is going to help you level up and optimize your performance on the golf course and in every area of your life. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. It brought me back to my 3 years of competitive Krav Maga and just the positive, immediate impact some form of a martial arts practice had on me as an individual outside of the gym. You're going to enjoy this conversation. Make sure you go follow and connect with Patrick after. Without further ado, please help me welcome Patrick Sebastien to the show. Patrick, I think you're the first guest I can confidently say this about. You've literally been punched in the face repeatedly, multiple times, and found a way to keep going. So for my audience, who maybe some have been literally punched in the face, but others metaphorically punched in the face, a blow-up hole, a bad round, a divorce, a failed business deal, what's the word of wisdom you share with them to help them bounce back from such a devastating incident?
I think the word is perseverance. There's something about getting punched in the face that wakes you up also. I think that, if we bring it to golf terms, it's bounce back, right? Like there's some players that will get punched in the face with a bad hole, and that leads to more bad holes.
Yeah.
And then there's the player who gets punched in the face and it's a wake-up call. It's like, hey, wait a minute, this isn't how I play. This isn't how I do this. So now let's use this as fuel to play better, to get more focused, to bring more intensity to my round. And I think that's where we see the difference between the good players and the great players, is their ability to bounce back from getting punched in the face.
Why do some people struggle so much to bounce back? It's that person who does turn one blow-up hole into 2, 3, 4 before they finally wake up. Or maybe the better question is, what separates those who can bounce back after a mistake or a hole versus those who struggle?
I think it's a couple of things. I think number one is, first of all, how much adversity have you faced? And one of the things that I love to do is I want to create adversity for my athletes. I want to put them through different versions of adversity, right? Whether it's pushing yourself in the gym beyond the limit that you're used to achieving, whether it's bringing you on the golf course and creating adversity in a non-competition format so that once you get into a tournament, it doesn't feel like this overwhelming experience. I think a lot of players also don't have the tools that they need to take control of their emotions, because emotions are very raw. Especially I work with a lot of junior golfers, and they're at those ages where they just don't have that emotional control yet. And so I've seen players just lose it over the most ridiculous mistakes that, for normal golfers would not be a big deal, but, under the pressure of tournament, the pressure of peer pressure, also being around the people that they know and all that. So I think it's that lack of training with adversity, which I think is so key.
What's unpack that more, adversity? Why is adversity I'm going to speak for the general consensus here. Most people hear the word adversity and there's a negative reaction. There's a yuck and avoidance and immediate discomfort. And if I'm hearing you're telling me adversity is a good thing. And more importantly, we should seek it out, create it, and use it intentionally for good. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, and I'll bring it to the science of flow states. I think that's where adversity makes the most sense. So if you study flow states, there's these 2 stages of flow. Now, flow state for people who maybe don't connect with that term would be when a player is in the zone, right? When a player is in the zone, when the game feels effortless, when things just feel like they're meant to be. And there's a lot of science behind this, and this is what I've spent the past almost 8-9 years at this point studying. And when you study flow states, there's 2 stages to flow. there's the struggle or challenge, and then there's the physical and mental release that is required to be able to tap into that state. And so that struggle or challenge is the adversity, right? So flow state is a state that is triggered through necessity. So if there is no challenge, there's no need for flow. Now, why do the greatest players elevate their game under pressure? And I believe it's because they've learned, whether it's they learned it practically or they just have it instinctively, they have that ability to tap into that state, and they see adversity as a challenge rather than a negative situation, right? So some people will be faced with adversity and the nervousness is too much. The pressure is too much. And then they start triggering a lot of negative physical effects, which lead to mental spirals, and we get into all kinds of trouble at that point. But then there's the player who's able to see adversity for what it is, which is, hey, I put myself in this situation. I thrive on these situations. So now let's do something about it. And let's use this adversity as fuel and bring it and drive it in a positive direction, which could be a flow state, or you're going to end up going in a very negative direction.
I love that. Like I wrote down as I'm listening to you in my own notes, like adversity equals opportunity. It's a
100%.
simple yet such a powerful reframe. And, you know, my listeners are once again going to roll their eyes because I come back to this almost every week, but it's a mindset and a word choice. If I get to embrace this adversity, it's an opportunity to grow that I get to changes your entire state and emotional being of how you show up and then take action in that moment, which I love that you're hearing, because now I have dozens of guests further reinforcing this, the power of word choice and self-talk. But what's interesting too, one of my mentors always told me, I come back to this often, is to expand, you must expand. And here, the way I'm tying this in is you're saying there's so much power in intentionally seeking out and creating adversity. Give us a few examples of where and how and what that could look like for both the golfer and the entrepreneur who's trying to find more comfort in the discomfort of adversity.
I think there's a lot of opportunities. I think the number one that I try to share with golfers who take this game seriously and who are trying to compete at a higher level is the gym. I think that we don't see enough. And again, coming from the fight world, coming from the MMA world, where, you know, the idea was always train hard, fight easy. So the harder my training is, the harder I'm pushing myself in the gym, the easier the fight will be, both physically and mentally. Right. So when you're in the gym, you're in a controlled environment where you can control the level of adversity that you're willing to take on. Right. So do that extra set, run that extra 5 minutes, push yourself with those few extra push-ups, push yourself to a limit, like figure out what is your limit, you know, and I've watched a lot of golfers work out in the gym and there's a lack of intensity. I think that there's this mentality in golf, unfortunately, that people work out, but they're working out more out of a sense of necessity rather than really embracing it for what it is, which is an opportunity to test yourself and to push yourself. And that is one way to create adversity, physical adversity. But the thing is, physical stress, mental stress, they present in the exact same way. So what I encourage my athletes to do is let's get you under physical stress. Let's create physical stress through exercise, through training. And then we can immediately use breath training and breathing techniques to help you take control of that adversity so that when it presents itself in a more, I guess, mental capacity on the golf course, you now have this formula that allows you to take control of it, not only take control of it, but drive it in a positive direction and use it as a performance enhancer instead of using it as something that's going to hurt your performance.
I love that. Like, I've been such an advocate, like fitness is the gateway to achieving your potential. And I agree. Like, I think that's beautiful awareness. There is a lack of intensity amongst the golfing community in terms of how they show up and take action in the weight room or wherever they are spending their time trying to move against a resistance. And that intensity really creates a daily battle, you versus what I call that inner bitch voice. It's an opportunity to learn how to win the battle, to leverage the tools or identify the knowledge or tool gaps so that you can better win them. And then when you encounter somewhat of a similar experience on the course during a high stakes negotiation in your business, it feels a bit more familiar. I was just watching the Ryder Cup this weekend, which, by the time Patrick and I's conversation go live, it'll be a little while back, but they had Justin Thomas hooked up to a heart rate monitor, and he's on that first tee on the start of his singles match on Sunday, and he's clocking in a solid 125. If you're not pushing yourself in the gym in any capacity, that 125 beats per minute is going to feel like such a more significant threat and stressor compared to someone who's been consistently putting in the work that feels manageable. It might almost go unnoticeable because they're so focused in the moment.
Absolutely. And I love that using like the Whoop device here. I really love using that specifically for that reason. Is that even with golfers, I've been able to look at, I had a chance to work with an LPGA Tour player, and notice an interesting thing we noticed was she had 2 different days, and we looked at her heart rate monitor statistics, her data, and we noticed that she performed better under higher pressure. So when her stress levels were more elevated, her performance went up. And I think there's something to be said about that. Golf is this interesting, and I think this goes for many sports, is you have to kind of find that balance between calm and intensity. If you're too calm, you're not going to be able to perform at the physical level that's required to hit a great shot or to maintain a high level of play. But obviously, if the intensity goes too far in the other direction, then you're going to lose control. And you're going to lose control of your emotions. There's going to be too much physical tension that's created. So you kind of have to find that sweet spot. And that is a flow state. That flow state is that sweet spot between calm and intensity. So I think it's, I think more and more of these devices and these ways of measuring the effort and the output that we're creating, whether it's in the gym or on the golf course. And I'll do exercises where we go out with our junior golfers or even competitive golfers on the course, and we create these kind of mini challenges. Let's see if we can get them under pressure and see how they deal with that pressure so that it's not waiting until the tournament happens. And then you're like, all right, let's see how I do. No, let's put you under pressure as often as possible. So once the tournament comes around, oh, this is just another pressure situation. This is what I live for. This is what I'm looking for. So embrace that challenge, embrace the pressure, embrace the adversity. And I think that alone, if you go into a tournament or any round really, and you embrace the stress, you embrace the pressure that you've created for yourself, you're going to be one step up on everyone else.
Yeah, and that repeated exposure you're referring to away from the actual competition environment, it's that repeated exposure that helps you learn to, like you mentioned, calibrate. Where's my specific level of intensity, between flow, calm, frustration, whatever emotions you need to pull in there to dial in the focus, presence, and flow you need to perform at your best. And what I'm also hearing too is just there's so much opportunity in utilizing technology, in slowing down to journal, reflect, to look inward, and to learn from all of your rounds and practice sessions, independent of what you score, as a means of collecting feedback to better learn how to dial in and calibrate your emotional and physical state to give you the best possible chance to play well.
Yeah, and something interestingly enough, we just created something for our players, which is a post-round analysis form. So I try to encourage a lot of our players to journal after a round because that is the best learning opportunity. And not just stats are important, and fairways hit, greens in regulation, all that, but that doesn't tell you much about how they actually performed. It's just a statistic. And so we created this post-round analysis form, which really touches on the technical, physical, and mental aspects of the game. And my favorite part is the mental component, because then it forces them to relive their round and figure out, okay, hold on. Was I mentally focused? Was I feeling strong and confident before I teed off? Were there moments in the round where I felt that confidence to start to kind of either elevate or go in the other direction? How did I bounce back from adversity? And so I learned so much about our players from what they're able to describe immediately after a round. And then we have something to work on. Because great, you hit all your fairways, but you didn't score very well. Why not? Right? Was it because you weren't focused? Or was it because of adversity? Like whatever the reason. So I think it's just so important to take control of that. And interestingly enough, with technology, creating this form where all they have to do is log in and fill out these very simple questions just made that process so much easier for them than if I would ask them to physically take out a journal and write things down and get, you know what I mean? Like, I think anything we can do to facilitate some of the processes that are important in elevating performance, it just makes it so much easier for our athletes to stick to it.
Well said. I'll go one step further because I get that pushback sometimes. It's like, well, it just feels like there's an invisible resistance from taking the 5 minutes after a round to complete the after round report because that's non-negotiable for my clients. So I love we're on the same page there. So like for me personally, when I do my own, I voice note into the notes app. I can talk a million miles an hour, as my listeners know, as you're learning. So I can get it done in 60 to 90 seconds. But what I love about that too is I get all the emotional rawness out, while I'm in my car before I leave the course. And then a few hours later, after I've disconnected and come back to it, now I can further dissect it. I've removed some of the immediate emotion from the round, good, bad, or neutral, and I can better analyze it. But it's at least getting out the rawness when I'm as recent or as close to the round as possible so I can further dive in. So again, voice noting, there's no shortage of options. Get it done. That's how you spot patterns and opportunities for growth.
Yeah. And often, they have players who think they played a bad round, but then they do a quick review and realize, wait a minute, that wasn't a bad round. That was a couple bad mistakes. But in all, I actually played pretty well. And that boosts their confidence. Or other times where they felt they played really well, but then realized, so how come I didn't score really well? Oh, wait a minute. I'd forgot about that. And I forgot about that. So every round is a learning opportunity, whether it's a good round, bad round, it's part of the process, right? So the more you're able to take that opportunity, and I love what you said about do it while it's raw, do it while the emotions are high, because that is part of what you just lived on the golf course, right? I don't know that there's a sport like golf where emotion is such an important part of our performance because there's so much time for emotion to exist, right? In most sports, you're constantly reacting to what another team is doing, what an opponent is doing. So you don't really have that time to allow emotion to be too much of a part of the performance. As where golf, you have nothing but time. And how you manage that time is going to have such a huge impact on your round. So I think learning right after the round, how did I deal with emotion today? But if you don't do it right away, and once those emotions wear off, you may not have that same valuable insight that you would have immediately after a round. So I really love what you said there.
Do you include score as a part of that after round report on your end?
I do. I do. And interestingly enough, there's some philosophies, right? Which like forget about the score, shot by shot.
Yep.
I don't think that's realistic. And the reason is even in junior, especially in junior golf or any type of competitive golf, you're writing a score down on your scorecard. So whether you're trying to ignore the score or not, if you're writing down double bogey, that is registering at some level of your consciousness. And that's going to weigh on you, whether you're trying to ignore it or not. So I think it's really important that the score be part of it because score does trigger emotion, especially with competitive golfers that are trying to get to the next level. That's what everyone is looking at. That's what everyone is focusing at. From a development standpoint, it may be less important because, a bad score doesn't mean you're a bad player, just like a really good score could be a lucky break. But I think we have to acknowledge it. Maybe not dwell on it too much, but let's make sure we're acknowledging it and then dealing with it in any way that we have to.
Yeah, I'm glad that you included. I do as well. It's the very last question. So the process begins with, what went well, better, learning lessons, yada, yada, yada. And it's unique to each client I have. But it's interesting. You mentioned golf is one of those unique sports and that, we're not reacting. There's so much downtime in between our actions to sit, potentially ruminate and reflect. I played poker professionally. My listeners know this now. Now you know this. But when I work with poker players, that after session report, slight different verbiage there is so valuable. And I'm going to bring all this together, I promise, because there could be days where you're up several buy-ins, which could be thousands, tens, or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you played like absolute shit. You made so many mistakes. There's so much math in a game of numbers and variance in the game of poker. You can play terribly and you can be the biggest winner, or you can play incredibly sound and be the biggest loser. So the reason I bring that up is if we move a version of this after round report for the entrepreneurs in the business world, in your personal life, you can't just get hung up on the results to dictate how you feel. You need to be able to look past them and really analyze how well did I execute my process? What part of my process is working well? Whether it's your best financial month or your worst financial month, if you're willing to reflect independent of the measurable result, you can gain a lot more clarity to improve moving forward.
I love what you just said there. And bringing it back to the entrepreneur part, I've been doing a lot of deep diving myself in the entrepreneur world in the last few months as I build my business. And I forget who quoted this, but it was failure leads to knowledge No, failure leads to learning. Learning leads to knowledge. Knowledge leads to power, right? So when you think about it, the more you fail, the more you learn. The more you learn, the more power you achieve. And so I think that, and in golf, it's the exact same thing, right? Failure is a consequence of trying, right? Now, how you deal with that failure is going to have a huge impact on the effects of your overall game. But at the end of the day, if you're never failing, chances are you're probably not trying very hard either. Right. So and I think we have to remove the emotional component. We have to remember that it's a process. We have to remember that, whether you're playing 1 tournament, 2 tournaments, 3 tournaments, let's build slowly towards something instead of over focusing on that one single tournament and allowing it to be a bigger event than it actually is.
I like that. Speaking of big events, you had multiple opportunities to step into the octagon, the ring, and really, to be frank, encounter a potential life or death experience. I know it sounds harsh and candid, but that's the reality of mixed martial arts. And, being under the light, being in this high stakes, pressure filled environment, what have you taken away from your competitive fighting experience that's allowed not only you, but you to help your clients better cultivate presence and focus in these types of circumstances?
I'll be very clear, though, that I did not fight professionally. I fought some amateur fights, but I coached at the professional level. Okay. So the biggest lessons I learned were more from the coaching experiences and what I learned from the fighters I worked with. I did, however, I was the training partner for most of my fighters, so we went at it. Like that intensity, that intensity's there. I have the ring experience, I have the cage experience. I just realized early on that I wasn't willing to take on the risk that there is in professional fighting, and realized I think I'd rather let them take the risk and I'll handle the coaching part. But one of the main lessons I learned was, and this is where I think I really got turned on to the mental aspect of sport, was I saw some very talented fighters who had all the skills that you needed, who were killing it in the gym, but then under the bright lights that you just described, failed to perform because of their inability to take control of that moment. And then there were guys or girls that didn't seem quite as skilled, didn't seem to have quite the same level of talent, but were willing and able to take control of those high pressure moments and perform extremely well under pressure. And so I think what I noticed is like skill, talent will only get you so far. And I think we see that a lot in the golf world, right? You see a lot of these young golfers coming up and they're the next Tiger Woods, the next Nelly Korda. And then 5-6 years later, where'd they go? You never hear from them again. Yeah. And I think that often it's the grind, it's the reality of competitive golf that just gets to be too much. And sometimes if they're not seeing the results that they were getting when they were younger, or getting the results, or something that we hear a lot is a lot of these kids are being told you have so much potential, but when they don't perform to the level of their expectations, they have a really hard time understanding the why of it. And often they'll just give up because they're not able to meet the expectations that they placed on themselves or the expectations that were placed upon them from either their parents or the people around them. So I think that was it. I think it's expectations. Expect greatness out of yourself, but accept, right? Expecting and accepting, and accept that you're going to have to really work hard to get to the level that you're expecting, if that makes sense.
It does. And I've mentioned this on the podcast before. Like, I'm curious to learn the stat. I'll have to consult Lou Stagner, the statistician of the PGA, even though I don't think it's up his alley. Like, how many individuals across the PGA's history have won a single event?
Yeah.
And the reason I bring that up, because you mentioned, is like there's so much intention and energy dedicated to winning an event. And the moment you do, it's a massive identity shift. There's expectation, pressure. Was it a fluke? Am I an imposter? Fear, blah, 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 that most people crumble. And like you said, like within a few years, you don't hear from them again because the lights are too bright, the stage too big. And for somebody who's listening, maybe they've tasted success on the course or in their business, entrepreneurial endeavors. What's the message you share with them to help them continue to find a level of comfort and familiarity in the discomfort of that?
I think you need to own it. I think your identity, as much as we try not to allow these things to shape who we are and what our identities are, I think that it does, right? And so if you win a tournament, you need to own it and develop this champion's mindset. And I won. I earned this. Don't and sometimes you need to almost fake it till you make it. I think what you're talking about, this kind of imposter syndrome, is very, very common, and it's common in all sports. And I think you have to own it in a way that you almost force it, right? Okay, maybe I feel like an imposter. Maybe I feel like I don't deserve this win, but I'm going to pretend like I do, at least, speak the language of a champion, act like a champion, train like a champion until you feel like a champion. Because you won't always feel like a champion. Even the best players in the world will have their moments of doubt. Will have their moments of, oh, is this when things start to go in the other direction? But if you look at the very, very top, they're owning it. I don't know if anyone saw the Rory McIlroy interview recently where he was being heckled at the Ryder Cup, which you just mentioned. And someone said, hey, you're not that good. And he turned around and was like, no, actually, I'm really fucking good. Right. and he owns it. Or same thing with Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods, I think in his first year, his third tournament, was asked, what are your intentions for this tournament? He's like, well, I came here to win. Yeah. And people are like, hey, listen, kid, I don't know if you realize, but this is really hard. And well, we know how that went. Right. And so I think the best players in the world own their level, they own their expertise, and they expect greatness, but they don't allow less than greatness to affect them negatively. They just use it as fuel to keep pushing for greatness. And I think that that's the mentality you have to have. And I think especially in golf now, the level of competition is so high that, the one-hit wonders, exactly that. They win a tournament for whatever reason, and then we don't see them again. Why? Because maybe they think, hey, I made it, and they take their foot off the gas a little bit, when instead you should be doubling up on that effort, doubling up on your practice, doubling up on whatever it is that got you there in the first place.
Really well said. I mean, there's so many things I want to unpack. I'll start with, on the theme of kind of recapping the Ryder Cup. We all know Scottie Scheffler went 0 for 4 Friday and Saturday. And he described after the entire event, that was probably the lowest point in his golfing career. World number 1, countless majors and wins this season alone. And he goes 0 for 4. Yet here's what separates him from the best of the best. He bounced back and beat the number 2 ranked golfer, Rory McIlroy, that next day. And just kind of what we've been talking about in the beginning, that bounce back mentality, that commitment to owning, I'm the best player in the world. I can beat anybody any given day. He didn't let a couple rounds derail or knock down his confidence. He just continued to move forward and focus on what was within his control.
Yeah, I think, from a more technical standpoint, when you look at the format, right, where the first 2 days, Scottie wasn't fully responsible for the result. He had someone playing with him. And I think that, and there's something about that format too, where some of these players might be incredible on their own, but when asked to pair up, when asked to play in this type of team format, it might be that it was harder for the Americans to do that than the Europeans, whatever. But again, I think, and I love using Scottie and Rory as examples because there's so much content out there right now about what they're doing in the gym, right? So I heard an interview with Scottie Scheffler's trainer, and he also trains members of the Dallas Stars NHL hockey team. And these NHL players saw Scottie working out, and they were shocked at how much intensity a golfer was bringing to the gym. Rory is clearly an athlete. Trains like an athlete, killing it. Every time there's a video of him in the gym, I'm like taking notes because I love what he's doing. I love the intensity that he's bringing. And we see it week after week. Why are they always there? Because they're training with adversity. They're creating adversity, right? There's the physical benefits of working out. Obviously, that's going to help with speed and power and balance and mobility. But for me, it's more about the mental game. The more you push yourself in the gym, the more you prove to yourself that you're capable of taking on this adversity. In those high pressure moments, your body is ready for it. You have a neurochemical advantage because you've done it in the gym. You've created those moments of pressure. You've taken control in those moments of pressure. So now that you're under pressure, you have a different mindset. You're able to flip a switch that most people just don't have.
Yeah. It's so crucial. And I hope for those of you listening, you're really beginning to connect the dots that everything you encounter and experience in the gym helps you develop the skills, the mindset that's transferable to every area of your life. And I've been on my soapbox like a broken record. If you don't have a resistance training program as a foundational part of just who you are, how you show up, 3 times a week or 6 times a week, I don't care. It just needs to be a foundational pillar. If you are truly serious about achieving your potential in every or any domain of life, like that's non-negotiable.
period.
It is a non-negotiable. And I think the other thing that people don't also understand is the importance of, and I'm speaking as an older athlete at this point, is also the longevity that it'll provide you with, right? Where I think even at a young age, there's golfers, another thing that will hurt potential is injury, right? And so there's a lot of young golfers right now that are hitting, thousands of balls a week, but spending zero time in the gym. And that is a recipe for disaster. That is a body that is eventually going to break down. And now you're going to have to deal with a lot of injuries. And unfortunately, some players will wait until the injuries happen to finally realize, oh, now I think I need to get to the gym. So why wait? Why wait until that happens? Now, obviously, you have to train smart, and you don't have to kill yourself in the gym as a golfer, right? It's not MMA. The level of intensity is not the same, but there are ways that you can push yourself enough so that you start learning what you're capable of. And again, it's all about those mental triggers and tapping into that adversity.
Dude, you're making my life easy. It's a perfect segue. And where I wanted to pick your brain next is like most people quit before they hit their breaking point. So, I think I've shared this on the podcast. I've got 3.5 years of Krav Maga experience. I've done a sanctioned kickboxing match before, which I won. Nice. Phenomenal experience to say the least. But like most people quit before they hit that breaking point. So how do you help your clients discover their actual limits versus the mental story they tell themselves trying to protect their ego and their physical body?
I think it's interesting because in fight training, it was easy because there's a control that you have as a trainer over your athlete that there's a bell. Right? It's a 2-minute round. Here we go. And you're not going to quit before the end of this round. And as a trainer, I'm able to push them. I'm able to motivate them. I'm able to help them discover what they're capable of. And I think sometimes that's the thing. Now, however, someone who comes to a kickboxing gym to get a workout in, they're already expecting a certain level of intensity and adversity. That's what they signed up for. Yeah. I think with golfers, it's kind of the opposite. Is you're imposing this new thing on them that they didn't sign up for this. Hey, I came here to play golf. I didn't come here to challenge myself at this level of physicality. But then I think that's where the difference between those that make it and those that don't resides, is that at some point, even if you're extremely talented, at some point you're going to run into something that you're going to have to push through. So I think it's first of all, is you have to create that mental motivation. Right? So you're okay, let's get you to the gym. Now that you're at the gym, why are you here? Are you here to go through the paces? Are you here to do the bare minimum that you think is required to continue playing golf? Or are you here to test yourself? Are you here to challenge yourself? And I think it's almost kind of putting on some motivational videos and coming up with the motivational quotes and just trying to see, does this person have a champion's mindset or not? And unfortunately, some people just don't have it. Some people, it's like, hey, are you willing to work? Are you willing to do this? How badly do you want this? Yeah, I guess so. I guess I kind of want it. And unfortunately, that's just, it's not going to cut it. Like the competition is too high. Like I've spoken with professional golfers who are struggling either on the lower PGA tours or on the women's tours, and they still don't seem to have that willingness to really push it and to really do what's necessary. And that, unfortunately, there's just so much you can do for someone, right? At some point, they have to want it. And I think that's it. Is if they want it, then it's easy because they're willing to test themselves. They're willing to, and obviously you don't want to injure your athlete. And I would always start with, okay, have you done any cardio training? No. Okay, let's start there. Because that's going to be, lifting weights I have my mixed feelings about it when it comes to golf. But I think cardio is where put someone on a treadmill, put someone on an elliptical or on a bike. And that's the easiest way to just rev up that speed, rev up that intensity, rev up the incline, whatever it is that we're using to create more adversity. And let's see where their threshold is. Let's see where that limit is. And if they're like, oh, this is getting really hard. Okay, is it hard like I think I'm going to faint? Or is it hard like, oh, this kind of hurts and I have to push through it? No, I'm okay. I'm like, okay, well, let's keep going then. Right? I think it takes a smart trainer. You don't want a trainer who's going to injure the athlete, obviously. But just let's go little bit by little bit, week by week. And then I think there's a moment where the athlete realizes like, oh, I really love how I feel after these workouts. I didn't feel like this before. And that's often the feedback I get is I loved what I did in the gym today because of how I felt after. I hated it while it was happening, but it's, what's coming after, right? And once you get that feeling 3, 4, 5 times, then it becomes addictive. And that's when you see that shift where the golfer is no longer just a golfer, they become an athlete. And that's one of the main things that we try to focus on is this idea of creating athletes and not just golfers.
It's so interesting you say that, because I can tell you the clients of mine I work with who are competitive amateurs, they're trying to win their club championship, member guests. They play a couple local tournaments on the amateur tours. One of the biggest destructive stories I help them dismantle and rewrite is I'm not an athlete. And I've got one guy in particular, he is one of four boys. He's the youngest. His other older brothers were rock star athletes, varsity all 4 years, some of them played college athletics. One played some minor league time in the baseball realm, but he always felt like the runt of the litter. And most people at first glance, though this narrative is changing, don't see golf as an athletic endeavor compared to soccer, football, baseball, lacrosse, because there's not an intensity. There's so much just walking and waiting. And the story that he was telling himself is, I'm not an athlete. Well, that would hold him back from consistency in the gym, from adapting the mental intensity, that winner's mindset you and I were talking about before we hit record. And it wasn't until we dismantled that story and all of the traumatic moments he had where his siblings or his dad would pick on him for his lack of coordination, his lack of strength and power, we were able to help him really identify and reclaim this ownership. I am an athlete. And suddenly his consistency in the gym skyrocketed. He started doing speed training and his scores dropped, I want to say on average, 6 to 8 strokes in about a 90-day period, just because he allowed himself to identify as an athlete.
Yeah. And it's funny because I had a very, very similar story about a month ago where one of our top juniors, this kid, he's 17 years old, 6 feet tall, really solidly built, hits the ball a mile. He's hitting like 185 ball speed. Hits his 3-wood further than I can even dream of hitting my driver, so, and I asked him straight up and I was like, do you think of yourself as an athlete? He's like, no. I was like, well, why not? Because in high school, he was the golfer and his buddies were playing basketball, football, everything else. And they would tell him, you're not an athlete, you're a golfer. And so he grew up with this mentality of never feeling like an athlete. Yeah. And I was like, okay, but the day that you start thinking like an athlete and training like an athlete, you're going to be able to take all of this raw power and this raw potential that you have, and we're going to be able to harness this. And we're going to turn you into an athlete and we're going to turn you into a champion. Because if you have all this power without ever having set foot in a gym, without ever taking training seriously, now imagine, like as a coach, I get goosebumps with this type of athlete, with this type of player, because they haven't even touched on their potential yet. This is what they're showing up with, raw. Like, wait until we get you in the gym. And obviously at 17, we don't want to overdo the gym and we have to allow a certain amount of development to happen. But if we can start these, and it's not just about the results that you're getting now, it's about the practices that you're creating for a lifetime.
Bingo.
Like for me, when I started training in martial arts, I was 26 years old. And before that, I was an athlete, but I never really worked out. I never really took the gym seriously or training seriously. And this is also like 25 years ago. So mentalities were a little bit different about going to the gym and all that. But everything that I started learning back then, I still do today. If I go 2 days without a workout, something's wrong, right? And it's more that consistency and that mentality and the ability to perform on, at all the different stages of your life, how you, those habits that you create now as a young athlete, they're going to stay with you for the rest of your life. Whether it's, professional sports or whatever it is you decide to do in life, having that consistent practice of training, and I'll add breathing and meditation to that, is going to serve you in so many different ways.
Yeah, if you want to be a killer on the course or in your business, you need that physical fitness component to sharpen and develop those skills.
Yeah.
Now,
and you mentioned, look at the top level players, they all have that. They all have that.
Yeah. You mentioned the meditation, the breathing. It's interesting. Like one of the reasons I was so excited for our conversation is that you've got this unique experience, participating and being around violence at the highest level in a professional setting. Yet you also, as I've gotten to know you, have such a unique respect and approach to creating that presence, that calm, that, that calibrated, controlled energy. what have you learned through your experiences, coaching, fighting, and any other experiences to help you be able to calibrate such a calm energy on demand?
That's a really powerful question. I often said that the further I went in my martial arts journey, the more peaceful I became.
Mm.
Interestingly enough, because I think violence is there's different forms of violence.
Mm-hmm.
The violence we experience in our, day-to-day lives, what we see on the news, what you might encounter on the streets, for example, is usually a
Yeah.
violence triggered by emotion,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's a violence triggered by whatever the situation is. As we're in martial arts, you're dealing with structured violence, controlled
Yeah.
violence, a violence that we agree to. If you and I step in a ring to
Mm-hmm.
compete, we've agreed to this. This
Yeah.
isn't because I hate you. It has nothing to do with, sometimes there's a little bit of that builds up and it sells fights, but most of the time it's out of 100%. Like my best friends, the people that I had the most respect for, are people that I stood face to face with in the ring,
Yeah.
and the fighters that I trained. And so, interestingly enough, on my journey, so my original martial art that I started with was Muay Thai. So Muay Thai is Thai boxing, right? It's the national sport of Thailand, and it also has a lot of Buddhist influence. So there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the traditional aspects of Muay Thai that are based in Buddhism. And so you have like a ceremony before each fight, the music that they use,
Huh.
there's a lot of respect that's paid to your teacher, and a lot of that comes from these Buddhist teachings. And so I started to learn a little bit more about it. I wasn't a full-blown Buddhist, but I was curious about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I learned more about Buddhism, then meditation came along. And so I
Okay.
started practicing meditation more out of a curiosity.
Yeah.
And then the real magic happened for me one day when I'd been practicing meditation for about 6 months. And this was really at the peak of my fight training. And I went out for a run in Montreal. There's a park called Mount Royal. And it's this really nice kind of like our Central Park. And it has these
Okay.
really beautiful running trails. And I would always finish with like a really steep hill sprint at the end. So when I got to the top, it was kind of like that rocky moment when you get to the top of the stairs and you just kind of
Yeah.
relish in that energy. And then normally I would make my way back down. But for whatever reason, that one evening, I decided I was going to meditate at the top of the mountain. So I found this really
Oh.
cool little cliff overlooking the city. And I sat there and I closed my eyes and I had my first really powerful meditation moment, right? In
Mm.
Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, they'll call it Satori, which is this awakening moment.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I'd ever had a spiritual experience. It was the first time that I believed in anything greater than what I could see with my own eyes.
Yeah.
But as the coach, as the fighter, I also recognized that I had tapped into this peak performance state. Because when I did open my eyes after living through this really powerful experience, I got up and I felt lighter, I felt faster, I felt stronger. I started shadow boxing and I felt unstoppable, especially that I was on this cliff overlooking the city. Like it almost had this kind of movie-like kind of, scenario. And then I ran for a bit and that felt effortless. And then that was, 17 years ago. And to this day, it's a formula that I've continued to use to try to tap into these peak performance states. And so that's how meditation to me started to make sense, not only from a spiritual perspective, but much more of a science and performance perspective. So I think a lot of people have these sorry, my mic. I think a lot of people have these misconceptions about meditation and that it's only about this one thing when it's a tool. And it depends on how you use that tool and how you combine it with the other tools that we can use to achieve performance. So yeah, I can talk for a while about meditation because it's something that I believe very, very strongly in,
Yeah.
especially from the performance perspective.
So bring it all together for us. And I'm obviously going to put the context out there. It's going to look different for every client. But if you're going to walk us through a sample peak performance blueprint that is on the day of, or it may for you and your clients begin the night before, to help them perform at a perceived high stakes event, whether that's a negotiation, a closing, a tournament round, like walk us through, what does that process, the 12 to 24 hours before look like for your athletes to get them in the best position possible to be able to perform to their potential?
Okay. I can, the 12 to 24 hour thing is important, but it's kind of like saying, if I get you to work out 24 hours before a tournament, well, you're not getting the results of the workout, right? The workout started 6 months before when you were consistently hitting the gym. Meditation is very similar in the sense that one meditation session isn't going to change your life. I mean, it might trigger something that has the potential to change your life, but you have to have put in the work. So, in order to get the most out of that 24 hours, what did your last 6 months look like? Have you been consistently working out? Have you been consistently meditating? And I say that because that's the pushback. A lot of people are willing to go to the gym, but getting them into a consistent meditation practice, I think as a coach is the hardest thing to get
Mhm.
people to do because the effects are going to take a while. It's a long-term investment.
Yeah.
Meditation is a long-term investment. However, where I get more success to get people initiated is what I call breath training. So I think there's a difference between meditation and breath training. I think
Mhm.
meditation has much more focus on the mind, as where breath training is much more of a tool about taking control of the physical aspects of
Mhm.
performance. So for me, if we're talking about the 24 hours or even the 12 hours, first of all, short meditation sessions with a focus on visualization.
Yeah.
So using specific breathing techniques to help you get into a calm, focused state, and then making sure that mentally, all I'm asking them to do is to visualize themselves in these moments on the golf course. If you've played the course before, see yourself playing those most difficult holes, the holes that you feel may bring you the most adversity, and see yourself shining in those moments. See yourself on that first tee feeling strong and confident. See yourself at the end of the round, knowing that you're close to the lead or that you need a birdie or that you need a really good hole, and see yourself performing at the level that you believe you are capable of. Tap into that potential before you even set foot on the golf course. And like
Mm.
anything else, it's a muscle. And the more often you're able to visualize yourself in those moments and to create those moments, whether it's based on past experiences or you're just projecting these experiences into your future, that has a really, really powerful effect. And that's an exercise I've done. I'll coach people through this and I'll say, okay, now see yourself on the first tee. Are the
Yeah.
butterflies there? And right away, they're like, yeah, I feel it right away. Especially players that have a tendency to get nervous, that have a
Mhm.
tendency to struggle on that first tee box or in those high pressure moments. It's crazy how just eyes closed, bring your mind to that moment, and there are the
Yeah.
butterflies. There's that anxiety reaction. I'm like, good. Great. I love that we triggered this because now you're going to take control of it.
Yeah.
Now feel yourself getting more powerful. Feel yourself getting more focused. Feel those
Yeah.
nerves, feel that tension slowly leaving your body and turning into a sense of strength and a sense of confidence. And now I want you to hit that shot. See that shot flying through the air. See it landing exactly where you pictured it. And then I
Yeah.
think the more often people are able to do that 12 or 24 hours before tournaments, they're stepping up on that first tee box with this elevated state of confidence that just builds from round to round to round.
Yeah. I love that. And I'll add a little tidbit here. Something I found incredibly valuable is in those pre-performance visualizations, I always have my clients visualize either a mistake or a bad break or a poor outcome so that they can, just like we kicked off this conversation with, strengthen and feel, see, and experience their ability to bounce back. Because you and I both know some of the best golf rounds, lowest rounds ever, still have a handful of mistakes. It's not a game of perfection. So I like to add that into the visualization just so they can feel more comfortable responding to that adversity.
100%. And this visualization practice is something I started when I was training fighters.
Yeah.
And when I would train my fighters at the end of any training session, I would have them kind of sit in the middle of the ring or the middle of the octagon, close their eyes, and they had
Mm.
to do the first round of their upcoming fight. So it was a 5-minute meditation. And I made sure to tell them, I want you to visualize performing all of the combinations and all of the techniques that you're hoping to perform. But I also need you to visualize getting punched in the face. I
Yeah.
need you to visualize getting knocked down. I need you to visualize being in trouble and getting out of trouble, getting hit and coming back from getting hit. Because that's the main difference is in fighting, you can't control what your opponent's going to do. In golf,
Yeah.
you can't control what the golf course is going to throw at you, right? You
Yeah.
almost have to see the golf course as the opponent, not the
Mm-hmm.
people that you're playing with, because you have no control over what they're doing. In the same way that you are going to get some bad breaks. You are going to get a bad bounce. You are going to have
Yeah.
something that golf course is going to fight back. There's days where it won't. And those are the amazing rounds that somehow, we get to experience every once in a while. But yeah, I
Yeah.
100% would agree with what you said. Include some of that adversity in your
Yeah.
visualization so that you
Yeah.
go there feeling like, oh, this is nothing. I can handle this. Big deal, right?
Bingo. So imagine this. There is a billboard centrally located in the middle of a golf course. So it is visible from all 18 tee boxes. what's the one message you would write on that billboard for all golfers to see?
Expect greatness.
Mm.
Because I think that it's, this idea of expectations, right? You're supposed to manage your expectations. And I feel like the best players in the world, they step up on that tee, they're expecting to make birdies. They're expecting to play incredible golf. But at the same time, it's okay to expect greatness while accepting less than greatness. Because we're not going to birdie every hole and we're not going to play our best every single time we get out there. But if I don't expect it, how am I ever going to make it happen? Right? Yeah. I can step up at a tee box and think, I'm going to make birdie on this hole. It's a done deal. In my mind, I'm making birdie. But if I don't, okay, I accept that just happened, but now I'm going to expect it again on the next hole. So, but if you never expect it, if you don't expect greatness, it's almost impossible to achieve it.
Yes.
So I think that I want to nurture that champion's mindset. Because again, if you look at the best in the world, Tiger Woods stepped up to every tee box in every tournament expecting greatness. Rory McIlroy expects greatness. The best players expect to be great. And that's what makes them great, right? They don't wait until they had the results. They expect it right away, and then they do whatever it takes to meet those expectations. But if you don't have those expectations, it's going to be really, really hard for you to find the motivation and to find the fuel that you need to get to that level. So that's definitely,
love that.
Yeah, I think that's what I've been writing for the last few months, of just trying to drill this into our athletes and make them believe that they have the ability to do whatever it is they want to do, but now they have to put in the work and match those expectations with the work that you're doing.
Incredibly well said. This has exceeded my already high expectations. I am so grateful for the conversation. Patrick, wonderful. Where can our listeners go to learn more about you and to apply to work with you?
FGA Golf, so Fouezy Golf Academy, that's the academy that I work with. My business partner and I, Steve Fouezy, he handles all the technical stuff. I handle the physical and mental aspects of the game. So if they go to fgagolf.com, they can find everything that's there. FGA Golf on Instagram, FGA Golf on YouTube. So we're pretty active on the socials too. So there's tons of really cool videos out there of the different aspects of the game that we like to teach.
This has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me.
You're very welcome. I really enjoyed this as well.
Yeah, and for those of you listening, thank you for tuning into another episode. Another episode just rich in tangible takeaways, action steps, and plenty of questions and prompts to get you to change your perspective. So make sure you go back, you listen again, you take notes, and be sure to share it with a fellow golfer, business owner, entrepreneur, somebody just like you committed to achieving their potential. And if you haven't done so already, it takes 30 seconds to leave a genuine rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening to today's conversation. That rating and review goes a long way in supporting the show. It's greatly appreciated. Well, thank you again for joining us. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Hit them straight this weekend, and we'll catch you in the next conversation.